Today we shall discuss on the functions of an ecosystem. As we have already studied about the structure of the ecosystem, which consists of both biotic as well as abiotic components. The biotic components, we have seen that it includes producers, consumers and decomposers. The abiotic components are those which help in the survival of the organisms such as the climate, soil, water, topography, etc. So today we shall see in detail what are the functions of an ecosystem. So what are the functions of an ecosystem? Ecosystems perform several crucial functions that are essential for maintaining life and regulating the planet's systems. These functions include productivity, decomposition, energy flow, nutrient cycling, habitat provision, biodiversity maintenance, climate regulation, and water filtration. Based on the different levels, there are different stages of functionality within ecosystem, such as the primary function, secondary functions, and tertiary functions. Primary functions include energy flow, primary productivity, and nutrient cycling. Secondary functions include consumption, which is the process where the primary consumers obtain energy by feeding on the producers. Decomposition, the breakdown of dead organic matter by decomposers such as bacteria, fungi into simpler substances, helping in releasing the nutrients back into the ecosystem. The secondary functions also include secondary productivity, that is, the rate at which the consumers convert the energy acquired from food into new biomass. And finally, secondary functions help to maintain ecological balance, which brings a balanced interaction between the organisms and the environment, which helps in the stability of the ecosystem. Tertiary functions involves a higher level consumption of secondary consumers by tertiary consumers, that is the top predators, and in some cases quaternary consumers. It also helps in maintenance of the biodiversity, which provides habitats and supports the genetic and species diversity, which is vital for the resilience and stability of an ecosystem. Finally, the tertiary functions help in offering ecosystem services, that is, which helps to provide benefits to humans resulting from the interaction between biotic and abiotic components. So, therefore, in general, the primary functions lay the groundwork for life and productivity. The secondary functions involve the transfer and recycling of energy and matter, and the tertiary functions describe the higher level benefits and complexities that arise from the interactions of these components within the ecosystem. So, therefore, to understand the functions of an ecosystem, these terms will help us to understand the important functionalities of an ecosystem, such as the energy flow, which will help us to define the ecological pyramids, the different trophic levels, which can be described very well by the terms food web and food chain. Let us see how energy flow takes place in a food chain and a food web. So, what is energy flow? It is the movement of the energy through a series of organisms starting from the primary producers to various levels of consumers, and this energy from one organism to another as they consume one another, forming the basis of energy flow in the ecosystem. So there are different types of food chains, such as the grazing food chain and the detritus food chain. You see that the food chain is a linear sequence of organisms through which the transfer of energy and nutrient takes place, which forms the basis of energy flow in an ecosystem. So in a grazing food chain, what we can see over here is that there are primary producers and secondary producers, and where The food chain is more prevalent in those ecosystems where a substantial part of the net primary production is grazed on by the herbivores. Thus, there is enough energy to support the higher trophic level and in turn a food chain. Therefore, it starts from a green plant and goes to grazing herbivores and on to carnivores. Whereas in a detritus food chain, we can see that the food chain starts with the dead organic matter, which is decomposed by microorganisms or by the organisms such as the earthworm, which are then eaten up by the other organisms. Thus, it is less dependent on direct solar energy and more on the supply of organic matter by another ecosystem. Let us see what is a food web and how energy flows in a food web. We all know that food web is not a single sequence of organisms. It forms complex series or sequences of organisms which can get connected at different levels, and you find that it forms a complex matrix and describes the interrelationship of organisms at different levels. So here you can see a good example of various organisms occupying the polar regions where they are seen to interact with each other. Therefore, understanding the energy flow of ecosystems will help us to understand the various components of an ecosystem and how the organisms interact and how they impact the environment, therefore affecting the ecological balance. Now let us have a look at the next important component to describe the functions of an ecosystem, that is the ecological pyramid. What is an ecological pyramid? Ecological pyramid is the graphical representation to understand the relationship between the producer and the different levels of consumers in terms of a number of species, their biomass or the energy accumulated. They are therefore the graphical representations of different trophic levels in energy flow in the ecosystem. They are also known as the models of energy flow in an ecosystem. We can find three different types of ecological pyramids. Number one, the pyramid of numbers. Number two, the pyramid of biomass. And number three, pyramids of energy. Pyramid of numbers. Let us see how pyramid of numbers helps us to understand the functions of an ecosystem. Well, the pyramid of numbers helps us to understand the relationship between producers and consumers in terms of population at each trophic level. Here we need to count only the number of organisms, which will help us to understand the changes that is happening in the ecosystem at different times of the year. There are different types of pyramid of numbers based on its shape: the erect pyramids or the upright pyramids and the inverted pyramids. The erect pyramid of numbers, in these ecosystems there are numerous small autotrophs that support lesser herbivores, which in turn supports a small number of carnivores, and hence this pyramid is said to be upright. This type of pyramid is found in aquatic as well as grassland ecosystems. For example, in a grassland ecosystem, number of grasses are much more than the number of herbivores, and in turn the number of herbivores is more than the number of carnivores. Now let us see the inverted pyramid of numbers. The inverted pyramid of numbers example, you can find it in a parasitic food chain as well as in an aquatic food chain. So where you can find one primary producer supports numerous parasites which supports more hyperparasites. Another example, in a tree ecosystem you can find many herbivores feeding on a single tree. In turn, the number of parasites feeding on a single herbivore are many. Pyramid of biomass. Pyramid of biomass is the graphical representation of producers and various levels of consumers in terms of their biomass. A pyramid of biomass is much more accurate, indicating how much of energy flows in an ecosystem that happens at each trophic level. So these pyramid of biomass can either be erect as well as inverted. So what is an erect pyramid of biomass? Where do you find them? Well, this occurs when the larger net of producers support a smaller weight of consumers. In most of the terrestrial ecosystems, we find the erect type of pyramid of biomass. Inverted pyramid of biomass. This happens when the smaller weight of producers supports consumers of larger weight, and this is especially found in aquatic ecosystems. For example, in a pond ecosystem, you find the producers, example phytoplanktons, have a very short span of life, but you find them in greater number and a rapid turnover rate, that is, they get replaced by new plants. Thus, at a given time, their total biomass is less than the biomass of the herbivores they support. Next, we shall see the pyramid of energy. So, it is the graphical representation of the producers and the various levels of consumers in terms of total energy accumulated by them. As the energy flows in the ecosystem, the energy decreases as it goes from the higher organisms and higher up in the trophic level, and the pyramid of energy is always erect, both in the aquatic as well as the terrestrial ecosystem. This method of showing energy flow in the ecosystem overcomes the issue with the other two methods as it shows the actual energy transferred. However, this method of showing energy flow has one flaws, that is, it is very difficult to collect the energy data of a particular trophic level. Let us understand the functions of an ecosystem with respect to metabolism and how metabolism plays a very important role in the living organisms. Well, let us understand that metabolism is the basis for all living organisms. So, what is metabolism? Metabolism is the sum total of chemical reactions taking place in the cells of living organisms, which involves either breaking or making of biomolecules. So, in simple terms, metabolism results in either formation of complex compounds which are formed from simple molecules or simple biomolecules which are being formed from complex molecules. So, therefore, the metabolism forms the basis of any living organism, because every living organism uses and releases energy, and this is then passed on from one organism to another through different food chains and food webs. Now let us see how the flow of energy takes place within an ecosystem. What is this flow of energy? How does it take place? Well, the flow of energy is found to be unidirectional, that is, it flows in one direction from the producers to the consumers at successively higher trophic levels. And we know that this energy cannot flow back because a higher level consumer, such as a snake, cannot be the food for a lower level organism, such as a bird. Now let us look at the flow of energy a bit more closely. Green plants absorb a very small fraction, about 1% of the total energy, reaching the outer part of the atmosphere. Through the photosynthesis, they convert this energy into the chemical energy which is stored as food in the form of carbohydrates. A part of the trapped energy is used by the plants in metabolic activities like the growth of the new tissues, and a part of it is lost into the surroundings as heat. Now we know that the remaining energy is available as food to the primary consumers. Thus, we see that only a fraction of energy can be absorbed by plants, which is finally made available to the next trophic level. When, for example, the primary consumers like the deer or the grasshoppers eat the plants, they get the available energy in the plants. Some of this energy is used for the activities like moving, digesting, etc., and some of it gets lost as heat. So only 10% of the available energy in the food gets transformed into new tissues or biomass for the deer or the grasshopper. This is the available energy that is made available to the carnivores or the secondary consumers at the next trophic level. At this level too, we can find that there is a loss and storage of energy which follows the same above pattern, and this continues at every trophic level. Apart from this, the energy from the dead plants and animals is also transferred to the decomposers. We find that when energy flows from the producers to the consumers at different levels, there is a loss of energy at each trophic level. It has been found, therefore, that only 10% of the energy is available to a trophic level, which is transferred to the next trophic level. This is called as the 10% law. For example, let us see. If 10,000 kilocalories of energy is available to the grass, that is the producers, 1000 kilocalories of energy would be available to the grasshoppers or the primary consumers, and therefore 100 kilocalories will become available to the next level, that is the secondary consumers, and only 10 kilocalories would be finally available to the consumers at the third order. After this, a little energy only will be left for the next level. So the food chains generally will have up to 3 or 4 trophic levels. So to summarize on what we have discussed and learned today, we can understand that organisms in an ecosystem acquires energy in a variety of ways that are transferred from one trophic level to another, that is from the bottom to the top of the food web, with energy being lost at each transfer. We can also understand the efficiency of these transfers and helps us to understand the different behaviors and eating habits of different animals of different trophic levels. Also, the modeling of ecosystem can be done with the help of the ecological pyramids of energy as compared to the pyramids of biomass and pyramid number, though they can give us vital information about the ecosystem structure as a whole.